Under Biden, the bad ones are coming in at a level that nobody ever thought was even possible. Nobody thought this was possible. In Venezuela, the crime is down 67% from what it was a year and a half ago, because they're taking all of their gangs and all of their criminals and they're depositing them into the United States of America. Venezuela, think of it, their crime. Wouldn't we love to have a statistic where crime is down 67%? Ours is only going in one direction. But I stand before you today to declare that Joe Biden's border bloodbath, and that's what it is. It's a bloodbath. They tried to use that term incorrectly on me 2 weeks ago. You know, it's all about misinformation. That's all they do is disinformation, misinformation, fairly closely related, those two words. But they basically mean that it's all talk, but it's a border bloodbath, and it's destroying our country. It's a very bad thing happening. It's going to end on the day that I take office, which will be January 20th. It'll end.
A murder on Grand Rapids southwest side yesterday.
Armed and dangerous.
This is the parking lot where police responded yesterday to gunfire reports, and it is where they found 22-year-old Leah Gomez, who was pronounced dead right here at the scene.
A mom to a nearly 2-year-old daughter with special needs.
Sledgehammer smashing through the jewelry cases.
It should be surprising, but it's not.
Great Lakes Crossing and Oakland Mall in Troy were hit by this crew, linked back to his cell from Chile in South America.
The Chilean gangs have been hitting us very hard. We have 100+ teams in operation right now in America.
Police say Brandon Ortiz Vite used a handgun he bought illegally to shoot Ruby Garcia multiple times on Friday before leaving her body on the freeway and driving off in her car. Just an awful story, and he confessed that he committed the crime.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about an amazing moment that happened at the White House press conference, which, you know, we don't get too many amazing moments. In fact, we really don't get any moments because the affirmative action press secretary, she never really answers questions, right? But, you know, sometimes you get moments like the moment we're going to talk about here where Peter Doocy is going to confront Karine's Jean-Pierre with the words of Biden doing his presidential primary, the same words, similar words that Trump used when it comes to describing what would happen to the economy and the auto industry if we did not address our trade issues with China. He said that there would be a bloodbath. Now, in full context of that statement, everybody knows what Trump was talking about. In fact, the definition of bloodbath actually has to do with economic disaster, right? I mean, that is the definition, or one of the definitions of the term bloodbath. That is how it is colloquially used. However, the mainstream liberal media pretended like that wasn't the case, right? That Trump meant some type of threat of violence, which is extremely ridiculous, especially when you consider the context of what Trump was saying. And the mainstream liberal media, the state-sponsored media, of course, and rightfully so, was mocked and ridiculed for what clearly and obviously was fake orchestrated outrage over Trump using that term, okay? Because the mainstream liberal media, they have a history of using the term, again, because the term is very, very, very common. So with that being said, what does the mainstream liberal media do after getting backlash for their fake outrage? Well, they do what they always do. They double and they triple down because of their Trump derangement, okay? And now they're on the fake bloodbath outrage part 2 because Trump wisely is continuing to use that term to describe what is happening in this country, but now he's doing it when it comes to the border, right? He's saying that Biden's border crisis is a bloodbath, okay? As we have situations where Americans have been killed at the hands of illegal immigrants, or illegal immigrants have committed acts of violence, murder, because they're being let into the country by the Biden administration. So Trump is taking advantage of that, and the mainstream liberal media is falling for it, hook, line, and sinker, and basically trying to have fake outrage over Trump using the term bloodbath, right? Trying to pretend that Trump is calling for some type of political violence when that's simply not the case. Actually, what he's advocating for is to stop the violence, right? The violence that is happening in this country as a result of Biden's open border policy. So with that being said, Karine's Jean-Pierre, right? Karine's Jean-Pierre. She's going to be asked by a reporter in the liberal media about Trump using that term and what she thinks about Trump continuing to use the term. Take a look.
Going back to the bloodbath question, the former president used that terminology a week or two ago, but he's talking about it again today. What's the White House reaction to the use of that term, bloodbath?
I'm going to be really mindful here because it is president. Obviously the former president is also a candidate here, so want to follow the law with the Hatch Act. But we have to denounce. Our response is we have to denounce any violent rhetoric that we hear, certainly from our leaders, right, that tears our country apart. It could tear our country apart and puts our fellow Americans in harm's way, in danger. So we have to denounce that. And look, I think and we think that the American people wants to see the country coming together. That's what they want. They want to make sure that we respect our democracy. They want.
Yeah, so you say that, you heard that, okay? So Karine's Jean-Pierre says we have to denounce any type of violent rhetoric that comes from our leaders. We have to denounce it, okay? So Peter Doocy, a.k.a. Deuce, right, follows up with the best question that you can follow up with, which is a direct quote from Joe Biden using the term bloodbath on the campaign trail, his primary campaign trail. He asked Karine Jean-Pierre, hey, since you think that violent rhetoric should be denounced, and you guys have basically said that regardless of the context that Trump is using the term bloodbath in, it is a violent term, okay? What do you think about Biden using the term bloodbath? Take a look.
Just a quick point of clarification, Karine. So when Donald Trump is talking about a bloodbath, it is violent rhetoric. What was it when Joe Biden said in 2020, what we can't let happen is let this primary become a negative bloodbath?
So I'm going to be really mindful and careful about Donald Trump, but if you read, because he is a candidate, we're talking about the 2024 election, you should read what he said in its context. So you got to read what he said in context.
I understand. Bloodbath is an ugly word. When Trump uses it, what is it when Biden uses it?
No. Let's be very clear. You got to actually ask me the question in context of what it was said, right? And what it was said when he said that, right? In his remarks, in his speech, right? And so that's being disingenuous in your question.
I'm reading a direct quote from Joe Biden. What we can't let happen is let this primary become a negative bloodbath.
He was talking about a group of people. A group of people. That's what he's talking about. What the president was talking about during the primary was not to allow it to be the words and the primary and that election to become negative. Two different things. They're not the same. They're not the same. And your question is disingenuous. And so, look, I'm going to be really mindful here. I'm going to be really careful. We have to denounce violent rhetoric, wherever it comes from. A former leader, we have to denounce that. Because we saw what happened on January 6th. We saw what happened there. When you have a mob of 2,000 people go to the Capitol because they didn't believe in the free and fair election that just happened months prior, because of violent rhetoric, you got to denounce that. That's not what leaders should be doing.
Yeah, so you say that, you heard that. Clearly, obviously, the hypocrisy is stunning, okay? But this is par for the course when it comes to Democrats. But I just want to explain to you guys just how much of a hypocrite Karine Jean-Pierre is and how much of a double standard we have here when it comes to Trump versus Biden, okay? She was asked that initial question about Trump's use of the term bloodbath from a liberal media reporter. Now, when she asked that question, she did not have any context when she asked the question. She just asked, well, what do you think about Trump's use of the term bloodbath? Okay, the fact that he's, using it now, again, no context whatsoever was required for Karine Jean-Pierre to denounce Trump's violent rhetoric, right? For her to speak on it and say, well, it's violent, it's dangerous for him to be using this type of rhetoric, right? Didn't take any context for her to actually answer the question and to denounce it, right? However, when Peter Doocy wisely follows up with a question about Biden's use of the term bloodbath, with more context, by the way, okay, slightly more context than the previous question, all of a sudden, context is required, right? If you're going to ask me about a Democrat using the term bloodbath, Context is required. You have to ask the question in context, or else your question is disingenuous. Again, it's amazing how that works. There's no context required for cringe Jean-Pierre to claim that Trump's trying to tear the country apart when he used the term bloodbath. But when Peter Doocy asked cringe Jean-Pierre about Biden using the term bloodbath, oh, now context is important, right? We must understand the context of what he was saying, okay, before we can comment on it, before we can speak on it. And clearly and obviously, Biden wasn't trying to tear the country apart by using the term bloodbath, which is amazing because if you listen to Trump use that term in context of him talking about the economy, right? He's clearly not talking about any type of violence. He's talking about an economic disaster, which is how the term bloodbath is used colloquially. Again, it's hilarious, but Trump doesn't get the benefit of the doubt though, right? Anytime he says it's automatically it's violent, right? Regardless of the context, it's violent, okay? When he uses it in the context of talking about the border, oh, he's saying mean things about illegals, right? He's saying mean things about illegal immigrants. Even though in the context of him using it, he's saying we need to stop Biden's border bloodbath. What does that actually really mean? Well, what that actually really means is that we need to close the border so that we can stop the violence that is happening in this country as a result of illegal immigration. Like, for example, because of Biden's open border policies, we have stories like Laken Riley, in which a young woman, college student, was brutally murdered by an illegal immigrant that was let into the country because of Biden's policies. And, you know, the White House should know that. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they don't really seem to care too much about Laken Riley because they won't even say her name.
Will President Biden publicly address Laken Riley's murder, allegedly at the hands of an illegal immigrant who was released by law enforcement multiple times on Thursday night? I know he's got a statement, but what about at the State of the Union?
Look, this is such a tragic story and obviously situation. This is someone's life that was lost, so I do want to always acknowledge and extend our deepest condolences to her family and to her friends and the people who loved her. And so want to always be sure to say that, and because it's so tragic. Look, I don't have anything to share about the president's speech as it relates to that particular question that you have. But we want to always be sure that we lift up the families who have lost their loved ones in that way. And I would reiterate, you just asked me about the Border Patrol chief. The president was just there with the current chief, Owens. The president went to the border, obviously Bronzeville, Texas, to lift up the importance of doing something at the border.
Yeah, so I want you guys to notice, when addressing the murder of Laken Riley, cringe Jean-Pierre says, well, somebody lost their life. Someone lost their life. Well, again, who is that someone, cringe? Why can't you say her name? Why is it so hard for you to say her name, but yet it's very easy for you to say the names of individuals like Next Benedict when you're trying to use the tragic death of a transgender teenager to push the left-wing agenda? Take a look.
And now, if you give me another moment here, I also want to address a heartbreaking development in the tragic loss of Next Benedict. For parents across the country, and I know for many of you here and many of you watching, including myself, the cause of Next's death was devastating to learn. As the president said yesterday, every young person deserves to have the fundamental right and freedom to be who they are and feel safe and supported at school and in their communities. Bullying is completely unacceptable, and it is on all of us to take reports of bullying seriously. There is always someone you can talk to if you're going through a hard time and need support. The president and his administration launched the 988 line to help, and we have a line dedicated to serving LGBTQI+ young people that can be reached by dialing 988 and pressing 3. I want to close by saying that LGBTQI+ young people across the country, you are loved exactly as you are, as the president has made very clear. And you should know this. The Biden Harris administration has your back.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that? You see the difference, guys? And it is a clear and stark difference, okay? When you have a young woman that's killed by an illegal, she cannot say her name, right? Oh, well, somebody died. Somebody lost their life. But when a transgender individual tragically loses their life in a way that the left wing is trying to use to promote this false narrative that GOP, laws are somehow causing violence against trans people, which is completely not true. She has no problem coming out here and saying the victim's name. No problem whatsoever. Zero problem talking about it. But she can't talk about the real issues or policy or even say the names of individuals that lose their lives at the hands of illegal immigrants when it doesn't fit the left's narrative. Again, it's amazing how that works. The difference is so stark. It's in your face, right? It's blinding, okay? So, again, man, I am, I don't really expect much out of cringe, right? But it's just getting to the point now where it's like, bruh, it's so obvious, like blatant, okay, that there's a double standard here. Democrats are not held to the same standard. Cringe brought up January 6th. Okay, and it's like, okay, well, I wish that a reporter would actually follow up with that question and say, okay, well, you talk about January 6th as a result of Trump's violent rhetoric. Well, what about the BLM riots as a result of violent rhetoric from Democrats? Because there's a whole highlight clip of Democrats engaging in violent rhetoric in support of the BLM riots. Okay, Democrats engage in violent rhetoric when it comes to supporting the Roe v. Wade riots, Antifa riots. Okay? There's a whole highlight tape of Democrats saying things that have resulted in violence. And we've seen the most political violence in this country from Democrats by far, right? January 6th is the only event they can point to as political violence from the right in the last 4 or 5 years. That's the only one. That's the only one. But I can point to so many instances of political violence from the left. So many. But yet, if you listen to them, oh, well, the biggest threat to this country are Trump supporters. Ridiculous, right? Ludicrous. So anyways, Peter Doocy, that was actually a great follow-up. If the mainstream liberal media was doing their job, they follow up even more and press her on this idea that all violent rhetoric from politicians must be denounced when clearly and obviously violent rhetoric from Democrats never get denounced. But they'll never do that, right? That would actually require them to do their jobs. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.